So this could be a rear foot. What makes me say that? This one's a little bit larger, right? This one is smaller. So more than likely this is a rear foot. This would be the inner claw and the outer claw right here. Okay. So, and the other thing I see when I look at this one from this angle, I notice one's a little higher than the other. And you see which one looks a little higher than the other? This one, right? Since the cow bears a little more weight on the outer claw and the rear foot, and a little more weight on the inner claw and the front foot, those are the two that tend to overgrow. So what that means is that we want to start with the most normal of the two claws, right? And that would be the inner claw in the back, that would be the outer claw in the front, right? Because those are the most normal of the two. The other two have some overgrowth that is partly a consequence of weight. Okay? It's just like your feet. You know, you have calluses on the soles of your feet where you bear weight on your foot. Right? Cows don't make calluses; they make more. That's the kind of way of thinking about it. Okay, so what we have here then is this foot. I'm going to start with the smaller of the two, which I think is this. Which I think this is the rear foot. What? Close. So let's see here. Okay, so the most important thing to me in trimming, and for some people, trimming is a religion. Right? It has to be done. For me, I try to keep it flat and I try to balance it. But most important, I try not to over trim. That's the single most important thing. Just goes to work. And so for me, like I say, the most important thing is to not over trim. And that's the one thing that will get you in trouble when you're trimming feet. If it happen to over trim. Well, this isn't real good, but that'll have to do for me. All right, so what I use is a gauge. So this is 80 millimeters, right, in length. Okay, and for me, it fits right across my hand right there. So for a cow that's in a standing position, I don't get down here to try to check it this way. I use my hand, and I go just like this, right? And I'm putting this part of my hand right at the skin horn junction in the front. And what do we see? Short. So what that means is anything to trim here. When these walls are short like that, that means your soles are pretty thin, right? So that's the single most important thing about this. The other thing here is, when you look at this, the heel is right here. The separation between the heel and the wall is there, right? This abaxial groove. So I've got a mark on my gauge right here. If I needed to use it, and we use this for when we're training trimmers, we tell them never to trim it shorter than that, right? Or they're going to have the heel too thin. So that's what that mark is on the gauge there. That's the reason for that. So the next thing. So on this foot, the only thing I would do with it if it was a real cow in a real situation is I would open up this area here a little bit, right? We've got a little bit of growth on this interdigital area here. And sometimes that happens because if you look at Susan Robbins' book, talk a lot about Deuteronomy, but I think there's so many good things and stuff that he's put together. If you look at that book, he shows cows that when they cow hawk themselves, what we call cow hawking, right? They pull their hocks in, right? They rotate their feet out like this. Those cows are actually trying to put more weight on the inside. Right? They're going like this because they would like to have a little more weight on this inner claw. And so that's why you get this overgrowth in the center. Because they're getting more weight on the outer claw when they do that, but they're also getting more weight on the inner part of this claw. See what I'm saying? And it all has to do with weight dynamics, right? So this claw is larger, it's more overgrown, it's unbalanced normally because it bears most of the weight in the rear foot. So because it bears most of the weight, it overgrows. It's just like your feet. You have calluses on your feet if you bear weight on your foot, right? Cows on first calluses, you're supposed to put more down. So that's the reason. Okay, so we have these things figured out. We understand too that this loose horn right here is just heel horn, right? You'll see this a lot of times. You'll see people trying to dig this all out. And this is heel horn, right? That's normal. Because the heel overgrows the sole like that. And that's normal. Okay, so knowing these external features of the claw is worthwhile for that reason. Okay? Sometimes you get stones hung up under there, and so it's okay to do that, but to waste a lot of time trying to trim that all up is, it's just heel horn. All right, let's see here. We're going to make believe this cow needs trimming, okay? And it's going to be hard to do this. This is a really nice wheel, but it is very aggressive. Well, yeah, for those of you in the front there, you might want to put that on. So this wheel is designed, this is a very popular wheel in the US. It is very aggressive, okay, so it's not the one, if you've never had your hands on a grinder, don't start with this one, right? Don't start with this wheel because this one is very aggressive, right? But one of the nice things about this wheel, once you get comfortable with it, and I'm not totally comfortable with it, I haven't used one of these for a while, but what you'll find with it is, it gives you the ability to trim with the edge of the wheel, right? And so when I'm looking at a foot like this, and if the toes are a little bit long, then I'm going to remove that excess toe length by coming across here like this. Okay, that's the safest way to do that. I'll show you. Now on a table, all these things are, for me, I think easier. The only difference is, here I can look at this foot and I can see this is higher real easily. I'm looking right down over the soles here. But on a table, the foot's like this. So you can't look at it like this. You have to get behind it and look at it like this. Until you've got a real good sense from working on that particular shoot a while, and that's where a lot of these trimmers, they can look right down on the top and see real well. When I'm working on tables and I'm not familiar with a table, I've got to get behind it and check it like this to make sure it's flat or it's balanced or whatever. So I'm going to make believe that this one is needs trimming, okay? So I'll kind of show you the Dutch way that we would kind of go about this. One of the most important things in trimming, and one of the hardest things to teach new people when it comes to trimming is to not over trim this heel, right? Let me show you here all that I want to trim on this particular claw, because this one's higher, okay? This is the one that needs to be trimmed out. But let's say this one is slightly long, and that's what we took the toe back. That's about all we would do with this entire claw. We haven't really touched the heel, we've left that alone. And the reason you do that, if this cow is going to have a lameness problem, a claw problem, it's most likely going to be this claw, right? 90% of lameness in the foot, 90% in the rear feet, 90% in the outer claw. So this is the one that's going to give there a problem most of the time. Okay, so that's about all the trimming, if that much. Okay, then we would come over to this one. If you look at this one, you can see that this one is a little higher than this heel here. So I'm going to take this down just a little bit. I'm having trouble with this. So, when you start off with a grinder, don't start off with this wheel. Okay, this one is a little treacherous. Okay, but it really does a nice job. It really trims it down nicely, and you can get it nice and flat. So when I'm done with this thing, I don't know why I messed up with this one. I had a little, but this should be when we're done. Put these two front walls together here, like this. Lay the handle of the hook back over there. It should be flat and balanced, okay? And that's really what I'm looking for. I want these two surfaces to be balanced, both here and all the way back. I want it to be flat and balanced, okay? And remember, we're not taking hardly anything down out of this one to get that. Yeah, I accidentally drug the grinder into this claw. That's why it jumped out. Okay, then the third step is simply this. You'll have some people who really like to model this out in a big way here, but I don't worry too much about that. You know, I come out a little ways. You can see this is thin because this cow's not got hardly any hoof on it. Okay? But what you don't want to do, and you can see we're right next to the cording there, you don't want to come further than here. Your axial wall is right there. Your axial wall is right there, and you want to maintain that. The only time you would remove the axial wall is if you had a screw claw. Right? Because in a screw claw, the claw is not like this, it's like this. In a screw claw, the bone is sitting at an 11-degree angle like this. And so when it grows like this. So that's why you get that twisted. So with those, the first step is to trim down this dorsal wall, make it straight. Then I can use my hands to tell when I'm flat and balanced here. Okay? Sorry, I messed this one up. I messed this one up pretty bad here. Now, you don't really have to do much here. It's already open enough. Some people don't even touch it there. They only slope this one. Okay? So there's always all kinds of ways of doing this, right? So, all right. So that's functional trimming. If I had a, let's say I had a, if I had an ulcer here, I would slope it to the inside a little bit more. So I'd come in here, say I had an ulcer here, I would slope this a little bit more to the inside. I'd remove all the loose horn around the ulcer itself. Okay. Or if I had a white line here, I would just take this and remove the wall next to it, like this, until I got down to the necrotic horn, and then I would just keep going until I had all of it gone, because what you don't want to do is to dig a hole in the sole, right? You want to slope it to the outside so that you're not digging a hole that will just fill up with more organic matter and debris, okay? So that's kind of the approach to corrective trimming for a white line and for an ulcer. Okay? And when it's gone beyond that, and you come to the point of needing to do something where you have, let's say, a distal interphalangeal joint problem. You've got infection in that joint. Where is that joint? Where is the distal interphalangeal joint in this foot? Right? It's right in the center of the claw right there. And the proximal, right, between P1 and P2 is about a finger's width above the coronet, right there. So if I'm going to do an amputation, oops, and let's amputate this claw here. I start here with a scalpel. And I stay as close to this claw as I can, right? And I come right at roughly this kind of an angle right here. I'm making this incision for the wire, for the giggly wire, right? That's what this is for. And I'll come here, reconnect with that line I started. Stay as close to this one as I can. And you'll go through a ligament in there and you can kind of feel it give just a little bit, okay? And then, once I've gone through there, let's see here, let's undo this a little bit. I think the other is better, that's easier.
You don't can hide or?
No, that's so this. What does it measure? So what does it measure?
Okay.
Was I can measure the thread. If you remember, we were talking about 3.
This one we're removing here.
Was this?
I'll just
The second line was this. So
reconnect with my
that's actually
my incision that I made in the interdigital area.
that's my
Come right up through here like this. Okay, so you're going to be cutting this off at roughly that angle.
That's a, yeah.
Come right up this way with your giggly wire. Right? Okay. Now, this is the nice thing. For all of us as veterinarians, your job is done. This is all there is to the amputation. It's pretty much done. Right? Come in here with your finger. I guess I cut a little bit more. But what your role is to put the wire in place, right? So you're going to come inside here. All right. And I can feel a joint right there. What joint am I feeling? It's the proximal, right? Because remember, the distal is down inside the claw capsule. So it's duck soup. It's easy, right? Because we're at the point now. All you have to do is make sure that when you're placing the wire, that you have the wire on P1 and the bottom of P1, right? And you can feel it right there. This is the joint. So get a glove on and feel that, and that's all there is. That's all there is to doing amplifications. Joint is right about. It's in the middle there. So we come back about three-quarters of the way back, and right in this area right here. If we took a drill, let's see, 10 millimeters, 8 millimeters, pretty stout drill. Go right straight down through there, right, to the other side, okay, come out the other side. We can also then connect it with another one that goes from sole ulcer site up to here, or you could take your drill down through here, okay, and connect with this one from here, okay. either way, I try to get these two holes to connect with each other, and I take a curette and really score up the joint surfaces inside it. Okay? And so you can imagine it's going to be very, very painful in the post-op period. So. But that's the way you would do it with arthrodesis, and I always would do that. And also, I would put a drain in these for the first five or 6 days, right? And then take the drain out, and then usually you're pretty much good to go without flushing anymore through this. You got a situation on the farms where they can flush these once a day or every other day. That's pretty nice too. That helps a lot. But these are incredibly painful. Right? So I would always do this first. If the animal has any value at all, I would rather do an arthrodesis than to do a amputation any day. Okay, and it's not that much harder. Right? All you need is a drill, and a curette, and a drain. And you can do these on the farm, but I wouldn't do it on the farm unless you were sure they could follow up with pain management care. Just done with that as well. Okay? So that's it. There's really not much to those. There's other ways of doing those things, but either through the sole ulcer site when you've got a really bad sole ulcer, it's septic, right? And that's where the problem started. I would start there, come through here, then I would do the other one down through there, and then I would take my curette in there and work it around and score up those cartilage surfaces. And then it takes at least, most times, 10 days to 2 weeks before they start to feel a little better, because it's a really an angry foot for a few days, right? But once you do that, most of those are gonna do just fine for you.
Time to switch?
Good. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Brain count.
Yes.
You take off that cleat. You've got to give it antibiotics. It's got to go for slow
Yes.
when it's said. Why not just say it for slow?
That's probably the better thing to do in many cases. If they can take it for sure. Usually these are so lame that vacuum plants won't take it.
It's still going to be tingling a little.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then what we use is exceed, which is 7 days. And then
It's all fine. So anyway, so welcome and thank you for joining, and it's really great to have so many people interested in lameness. It did put a bit of a challenge to manage the numbers, but I think it's working really well and we had great interactions. So just to introduce myself in case you were not there this morning when we gave the lameness talk. So I'm Georgios Oikonomou, and I'm a professor of cattle health and welfare at the University of Liverpool. I have worked as a practitioner. My interest in lameness started with trimming lame cows and managing lameness on dairy farms, but the last probably more than 10 years now, it's mostly research interest in lameness, so I do a lot of research. It's still very applied, still on the farms, collecting real data, picking feed up, doing food trimming. And as part of this research, we've also used a lot of scanning of the food to do certain measurements. So that's the main part of my station. So you saw some really nice practical stuff with John Shearer on food trimming. I'm going to show you, we'll discuss a little bit of the anatomy and why we're interested in these measurements. And we'll do the scanning. And I've been doing this scanning mainly trying to measure the digital cushion thickness, the fat pads, which is a research interest. It may not have immediate practical applications for you guys if you're practitioners, but I'm doing this practical now for practitioners and students because at the same time as you scan the fat pad, we can also scan the sole thickness, which is something useful. It's something you could discuss with your farmers, your food trimmers, and I have done this, you know, with a food trimmer, talking about trimming and over trimming cows and having really thin soles. And I could just have my scanner there, like get a measurement, and then we really have an objective thing to discuss, so we don't argue about whether no, it's not too thin or it's fine. And I actually had really good interactions with food trimmers doing this scanning because they really like, you know, they did the trimming. We talked about preventing thin soles, and then I put my scanner on and we measured it, and it's like, you know, nice 7-8 millimeters, and we were happy. So it's something you could possibly find useful and give it a go. So I use, so before I go to the scanning, just a little bit on this anatomy. I really like this food where they made this at Liverpool for our teaching, so I bring it with me, and it's, I know you all know the anatomy of the food, but it's kind of a nice, quick reminder of things we've been talking about this morning, and we'll scan now. So important aspects when we think about the non-infectious lameness, you know, your sole hemorrhage, your sole ulcer, will be that you have your pedal bone here, which should be very strongly attached to the hoof wall, and especially in the period around calving, we have issues with these attachments which can be relaxed for many reasons. Anyway, the main issue we have there then is with these sensitive tissues here, which is that's your digital cushion, your fat pad. Maybe here it looks a bit better here. And it goes all the way around the tuberculum flexorum, it goes all the way back. And that fat pad is what's between the pedal bone and the corium, the germinal epithelium that produces the healthy keratinocytes. So these lesions, how these lesions develop, this bruising and the sole ulcers, that's why we have most of them. You can see that actually was lucky to get the foot with a bit of bruising. So you can see most of these lesions, we get them in this area because of the pressure here of the pedal bone through the fat pad on the germinal epithelium. So we know there is a lot of research to show that the thickness of the fat pad is an aspect in this cytopathogenesis. When the fat pad goes really thin, it's more likely to get these lesions. But the thickness of the sole is also important because it's protecting from the external pressure. So and if you have a very thin sole, then you may have damage on your germinal epithelium that comes directly from, you know, your external pressure. So managing this is very important. When we scan, we measure. What we measure with our scanning is the fat pad here, and then you can measure the sole thickness here. So how we do that? I use, for our big lameness project at the moment, we have this probe, which may not necessarily be better or worse, but anyway, we use this probe a lot, and I will use this for the demonstration. But I have this probe here. You can't do it using this probe. So I imagine most of you have that rectal probe. So it's not something that you need to invest a lot in. You can do it with a scanner that you use for your repro work. So you don't need to invest. It may not be the best images, but you can get enough information to get the measurements, and I'll show you how we do that. So I have to use the standoff to improve the contact I get with the foot. And that's like you need to order this from the ultrasound companies. I have seen the professor that developed this method has more experience than me. I mean, I've scanned thousands of cows now, but I've seen him doing it without the standoff. That's Jochen Koffler from Vienna. And he says that, yeah, you can do it, like probably better than me in scanning, but I couldn't do it. I always use the standoff. So, and I get some alcohol on the foot and on my standoff. Someone asked me earlier, why don't I use ultrasound gel? I normally use ultrasound gel, I just forgot to bring it. I forgot to ask actually in the list of things that I needed for this, but I have done it multiple times with alcohol and it's fine. So just a bit of alcohol and so what you want to do is you want to go here on the foot. Think about where your tuberculum flexorum will be if you look there to remind yourself. and then you put quite a bit of pressure. Can someone press the freeze button?
Yeah.
Just there. Yeah, perfect. So I actually got that fairly quickly, and as I said, you don't get like perfectly clear like images of everything, but we work with three anatomical landmarks. So what you get, that's why I have this, I think that's helping. So that's where you're deeper in the foot, we're scanning this way down. So that's your pedal bone here. And you see how you get your tuberculum flexorum here. So if you look there, so that would be your first landmark. And then this straight bright line going all the way, that's your inner margin of your sole. If I put it, actually it may help. That's pretty much what you have here. Could you hold that? Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So if you compare that, obviously it's not the same foot, they're not identical, but it's the same. So you have your pedal bone here, pedal bone, tuberculum flexorum, straight line here, the inner margin of the sole. So these two, if you measure the distance between these two lines, that would be your soft tissues. So mainly your distal cushion, your fat pad. And then if you go this outer out here, that would be the next bright white line. So if you measure this distance, that would be your sole thickness. So this bit here, which would be the more practical thing you may want to measure with your FARs, with your foot trimmers. And we've done some validation work for both measurements. The fat pad measurements are for some reason a bit more accurate. The sole thickness, your repeatability, I have to be honest, your repeatability is not perfect depending on how you scan it, if you move your scanner. But I think you get enough information, especially if you scan quite a few cows, to have a discussion with your farmer or your foot trimmer. Especially say, the previous group had a nice question, say you have a farm that the foot trimmer goes in and does like lots of cows for routine foot trimming, and then you see lots of lameness, lots of cows walking a bit, not as good after the foot trimming. You may want to have a look. Maybe I had the case where, because I talk a lot about these measurements and meetings and all that, I had cases of farmers then asking me, can you come and scan a few cows, because I fear that we over trim our cows. Or as I said, I've done this with foot trimmers, and very nice. Like, it doesn't have to be, blaming or anything. Just like, we all want to get better. And I had trimmers responding really well to this. Like, oh, that's really nice. We can have some accurate measurements. Someone else mentioned that it could be a nice thing to include if you're doing training sessions. You do training for lameness. You can scan some feet while you're trimming them to show that that's the sole thickness. We don't have a lot of research on where is the optimal sole thickness, but the general kind of consensus at the moment, I think, is that you really don't want to go below 5 millimeters. And I personally usually try to do like 7, 8 millimeters, like a good thickness that will protect the soft tissues within the claw. So that's what I'm covering in my station. Very happy to answer questions, or if you want, before we go, if some of you wanna, as I said, it was hard to do it for everyone to do like practice, because we got too many people, which is great to see like all this interest. But if some of you wanna have a go, I am done, but I'm happy to answer questions, or if you practice a little bit. I don't know, Jan, I think it takes a little bit more time, but he has more interesting stuff, so anyway. But yeah, go ahead. You can either like have a go, or any questions you want to ask me.